Today, we are tackling a huge idea, maybe one of the biggest ones out there, freedom. We're going to pull it apart piece by piece and really get into what it's made of.
So let me ask you this right off the bat. Are you as free as you think you are? And it sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer is so much more complicated than you might think. We're going to explore this with a little help from two very different, very sharp minds. So let's start with that ideal. You know the one we're all chasing?
I mean, this is the dream, isn't it? Absolute perfect freedom, doing whatever you want, whenever you want, just totally untethered. It's an amazing thought, a really powerful idea. But is it even possible? Is it real?
Okay, so our first stop on this journey is, well, it's a bit of a reality check. Because before we can even get into all the big ideas about society and politics, we have to face a much more basic force that rules over every single one of us, nature itself.
And our guide for this first part is the one and only George Bernard Shaw. Now this guy, he was brilliant, and he was famous for being provocative. He had this incredible knack for taking ideas we all find comforting, flipping them right on their head, and showing us the uncomfortable truths we'd rather not see.
So Shaw's opening shot is a bombshell. He just comes right out and says it. A perfectly free person has never existed, ever. It's complete fantasy. And not just that it's hard to get, no. He says it's impossible from the very beginning. And his reason why? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple.
It's because of this stuff right here. Think about it. It doesn't matter if you're a king or a construction worker. Every single day, nature demands its payment. First, you have to sleep for about a third of your life. Gone. Second, you've got to spend hours of your day eating and drinking. And third, you have to wash and get dressed. These aren't suggestions, They are non-negotiable commands from your own body.
And wow, this quote from Shaw just says it all, doesn't it? He calls this natural slavery. For about half of every single day, your time isn't really yours. It's basically mortgaged to the simple, unavoidable job of just staying alive. That's a debt none of us can ever escape.
But here's where Shaw really turns the screw. He says this slavery to nature, that's not the real problem. The really toxic, destructive issue starts when we humans get clever and start manipulating how all this work gets done. And that leads to a whole other, way more sinister kind of slavery.
This is such a crucial distinction he makes. You can't pay someone to sleep for you, right? Or to eat your dinner for you. But all the labor that supports those needs, growing the food, making the clothes, building the house, oh yeah, you can absolutely force somebody else to do all that for you. That work can be shifted.
And this creates two totally different kinds of servitude. You see it here on the slide. On the left, there's natural slavery. That's universal. We're all in that boat. It's just about survival. But then on the right, you get what Shaw calls unnatural slavery. And that is a purely man-made invention. It's not about survival. It's about one group of people forcing their share of the work onto another group. And Shaw's word for that? Hateful. So how does this unnatural slavery stay in place? Well, according to Shaw, it's the very systems we believe make us free that are actually locking the doors. He says governments just enforce it. They might get rid of one kind of slavery, only to replace it with what he calls wage slavery, and then call that a huge victory for freedom. You get a vote, sure, a choice between two of their rich friends, he says, and all the while, the papers and the news are shouting about how wonderfully free you are.
So the main point from Shaw is this incredible flip. The chains are not only real, but they're polished up and handed to us, and we're told they're actually symbols of our freedom. Okay, Shaw's argument is powerful, there's no denying it, but it's all focused on the external world, on money, society, politics. But what if the biggest barriers to freedom aren't out there at all? What if the most secure prison is the one we carry around right inside our own heads?
And for this, we're going to turn to a completely different kind of thinker, the philosopher J. Krishnamurti. He shifts the whole conversation inward. For him, arguing about governments and jobs completely misses the real point. The real prison, he says, is the one we build for ourselves.
Krishnamurti starts off by challenging something most of us just accept as true. We're all taught that discipline, following the rules, resisting temptation, is the road to freedom. But is it, really?
His answer is a hard no. He argues that discipline is just another word for resistance. It's about building an internal wall against life. But you can't really discover anything new from behind a wall, can you? He says true understanding and discovery can only happen when you're in a state of freedom, not in a state of constant resistance.
And this leads him to a radical new definition of intelligence. For Krishnamurti, it has nothing to do with getting good grades or having a fancy career. No, real intelligence is freedom. It's that alert, clear state of mind that has the freedom to question everything, to explore on its own, without being programmed.
So what builds the walls of this internal prison? What stops this true intelligence? According to Krishnamurti, it boils down to one main thing: fear. Fear of what our parents will say, fear of what our teachers will say, fear of breaking tradition, just fear. And that fear makes us follow and imitate, which, in his view, completely shuts down our ability to think freely and intelligently.
Okay, so let's try to pull these two big ideas together. On one side, we have Shaw's critique of the slavery that society imposes on us. On the other, we have Krishnamurti's critique of the slavery we impose on ourselves. So how do we combine them into a better, more complete picture of freedom?
Well, a more powerful definition of freedom might look a little something like this. First, you start with Shaw and you just acknowledge the reality. We are all slaves to nature's basic needs. Second, you look around. You identify those unfair, man-made systems that Shaw talked about, and you fight them. Then you turn inward with Krishnamurti, and you consciously work to break those internal chains of fear and tradition. And finally, the ultimate goal: to cultivate that real intelligence, the active, courageous freedom to question absolutely everything.
So in the end, maybe that dream of perfect, limitless freedom, maybe it was the wrong dream all along. Maybe true freedom isn't about having no limits at all. Maybe it's about having the wisdom to see the difference between the limits that are real and necessary, like needing to sleep, and the limits that are just illusions built by society and our own fears. And that leaves us with one final thought for you to take with you. Just think about your own life, your family, your culture. What's one tradition, one rule, one belief that you follow just because, well, because that's how it's always been done? And what do you think you might discover if you gave yourself the freedom to really truly question it?